I, 30, male, have been with my fiance, 26, female, for over 5 years now. Tina and I met at a restaurant. She had just started working behind the counter, and I had gone with my buddy to place my order. I couldn't take my eyes off her since she was absolutely stunning and had the sweetest voice. After placing our order, I kept telling my friend about how gorgeous she was and how I could not stop thinking about her. He told me that I should just ask her out. However, I was nervous and was afraid of being rejected. I grabbed a pen and paper and I wrote down my name and number and went to collect our food when it was ready. When I paid, I slipped the note to her and she blushed when she realized that I had written my number down. She called me that evening and we talked for hours. It was like we had known each other all our lives. She's the first girl I have ever met that I have truly been happy with. She makes me smile endlessly. My parents and my sister have met her also, and they like her as much as I do. Just to give you some background, Tina and I come from really different backgrounds. Tina's childhood was tough. She grew up as an orphan because her mom abandoned her as a baby. No name, no information, no birthday, nothing. As she grew up, she never got adopted. She had to go through a bunch of foster homes and has told me how they were horrible for her. Tina has one cousin, brother, Kyle, who apparently found out about her existence and got in touch with her when she was 16 years old. She and her brother are extremely close. From the get-go, my girlfriend had made it very clear to me that her brother was the most important person in her life, and I understood since I had an older sister as well, so I understand that sibling bond. The tricky part was that she would often cancel our plans at a moment's notice to hang out with him if he asked. She mentioned they both suffered from separation anxiety, and it showed in the way she prioritized him over our plans. There were times when we would discuss future trips, initially thinking it would be just the two of us. But then she would tell me how she wanted to bring her brother along. Once during a staycation, he called for no apparent reason, and she stressed out, feeling the need to rush back home because apparently her brother wanted her there. She also made it clear that he was her number one, leaving me with this unsettling feeling that even if we were married, I might still be second to her brother. It was almost like I had to compete with him, which was a strange sensation. To add to it, he would frequently call her during our dates, resulting in 15 to 30-minute phone conversations that interrupted our time together. My girlfriend lived in a tiny apartment with two other roommates when I first met her. Her brother, Kyle, would always find an excuse to crash in. One time when I FaceTimed her, I saw him sleeping right next to her. I felt extremely uncomfortable and questioned her about it. She told me that her brother usually slept on their sofa in the living room, but that night he did not want to be alone since he was going through a bad breakup. Later I told her that I did not feel comfortable having her share a bed with another man, even if he was her brother, cousin. She argued with me that the sofa bed was uncomfortable and her bed was bigger for the two of them. I told her that it was weird for him to keep crashing at her place when I didn't even do that, and instead of going to a friend's place, he wanted to spend the night with her. Tina brushed it off, saying I was overthinking it and that it was not a big deal. She told me I wouldn't understand because I was not that close to my sibling. Compared to Tina's childhood, mine was comparatively better. I grew up in a wealthy household and had two loving parents. I had an older sister that I was close to also. Hence, when I found out about Tina's childhood, it broke my heart that she never got a chance to grow up in a stable home. This is why I always tried to give her as much love and affection as I could. She and I had a happy relationship, so we decided to move in after we dated for 7 months. She told me how her lease was ending, and because I lived in my own house and was paying my mortgage, she asked me if she could move in with me. From the very beginning, I have always financially supported her since I have a really nice job. I earn in 6 figures and she has been aware of this. Initially, I did want to ask her to split the rent, But then I felt bad about it, so I let it go. She was still studying during this time, so I ended up covering all her expenses, books, daily needs like food and gas, you name it. Honestly, it wasn't exactly my favorite thing, but I loved her, and she genuinely needed help. I kept reassuring myself that it would pay off once we both graduated and landed good jobs and became more financially independent. However, conflicts would pop up periodically. I felt like since I was the one shelling out for everything, I should have the final say in decisions. Once, Tina invited Kyle up for the weekend as she wanted me to bond with him. Since he had been wanting to come and get drunk for a while, I agreed and bought a few cans for him. When her brother came over, he completely ignored me and went in straight to hug Tina. They hugged unusually long, and then Tina introduced him to me. I smiled at him politely while he had no emotions on his face. He then sat down on our sofa and ordered Tina to get him a few drinks. I used the word order because he literally did exactly that. I was quite taken aback because I had never, ever spoken to Tina that way. Throughout the night, her brother was a massive jerk to me the entire time. For example, he looked around our house and told me how I probably was a lazy bum who depended on my dad for everything. I clarified that I worked hard in college to get my cushy job and that I was paying the mortgage of his house all on my own. He then scoffed and started to bring up how he had recently been promoted. For context, he worked at a restaurant for the past 8 years and had been promoted as the manager there. As Tina and I congratulated him, he completely ignored me again and told Tina how he wanted to take her out for dinner since it had been ages since just the two of them had hung out, and how he missed going for the long drives with her. Tina agreed, and they started talking about all their good times, which made me very uncomfortable to hear. However, my girlfriend noticed I wasn't having fun and was being quiet, so we went over to my room to talk things out. Our discussion apparently took too long, and her brother barged into our bedroom screaming for Tina and saying how he missed her. Tina assured him that we would be right out, but he asked us to just hurry back. And in my frustration, I angrily told him to go away. I was really getting frustrated with how clingy he was around Tina, and it boggled my mind that she didn't see this. After sorting things out, we decided to go back. As I didn't want to keep my girlfriend from her brother, she stopped to use the bathroom and I waited in the hall, and from there I could hear her brother yelling at our TV, and he sounded completely drunk. This is when I noticed that he had been drinking continuously since the time he came into our place, and was almost 6 cans down. When Tina came out of the bathroom, he started to tell her how he wished they could have met at a bar and had a good time together since this was boring and he wanted to go out. Tina must have also noticed that he was quite drunk, so she told him that he should rest for a bit since he had a car. Her brother drunkenly went on to say how he hated the fact that she was with me and how he wished I never came into his life. I was pissed, and I honestly did not care what motivated him to say this. I demanded to know what his problem was, since clearly there was no brother in this world who was so involved in his sister's life. But he responded by yelling and attacking me. Now, I'm 6'3" and much taller than him, so I had to hold myself back from seriously damaging him. Tina was begging me to not hurt him while he kept screaming obscenities at me. I gave him just one pinch and he was knocked out cold. Tina screamed that I had killed him, but he was only unconscious and she checked his breathing. I told her that he could sleep it off on the sofa until he felt better. Tina then turned to me and told me that what I had done was unforgivable. I told her if that was the case, then she was welcome to leave me. I watched her eyes well up in tears, but I was too tired to argue with her, so I went up to my bedroom and just fell asleep. The next day when I woke up, the brother was nowhere to be found. When I asked Tina, she told me that he wanted her to apologize to me for last night and that he was not going to press charges against me. I scoffed and told her that her brother was lucky that I did not press any charges against him because he was the one who attacked me drunk. Tina brushed it off and told me that she was sorry for getting pissed at me last night. I accepted her apology, and since that night, Kyle has always avoided me as much as he can. Obviously, Tina continued to see him every weekend, but he never came in front of me. By the third year of my relationship with Tina, I was seriously worn out from being the sole financial backbone in the house. She would basically expect me to handle all her school-related expenses, even though she had her own savings from all the part-time jobs she had done. Around the same time, I started noticing how she would start acting entitled, as if all my support was given. When she finally got an internship, I thought, wow, now she could be a bit more financially independent. However, she would splurge her money on luxury items like shoes or handbags. She had tons of shoes, even though she would hardly wear them, and a couple of high-priced handbags. I was still stuck covering all her basics. We began fighting a lot, with arguments boiling down to her telling me not to dictate her choices and me likening her to a spoiled child I felt obligated to care for. Almost a year after her graduation, she still had not landed any job. Her self-esteem was wrecked. In the initial 5 months post-graduation, she had given it her all, but the constant rejections probably took a toll. What really irked me was that I had been suggesting she could have taken a part-time job during this time to make some money, but she never went for it. During this time, even though she was not earning a penny, she would constantly spend money on her brother or even send him a few $100s every month. If I questioned her, she would tell me how he needed help and that I was earning more than enough anyway, so I should not be selfish. This would really piss me off, since she was sending my money without permission and expecting me to be fine with it. Admittedly, I didn't make the situation any better. Frustration from supporting her and her brother had been building up inside me for quite some time, and it all came pouring out. The breaking point came when one night, before her school loan and phone bill payments were due, she called me asking for help. I lost my cool, yelled, and called her an ungrateful person who just used me for money without doing anything for herself. I told her our relationship was a sham, that I deserved better, a true partner, not a spoiled daughter. I told her that I had been contemplating breaking up with her. She immediately started sobbing and apologizing to me. She told me how she was going to do better and how she had no idea that I felt this way. She felt terrible for what I had been going through. Fortunately, ever since that conversation, she kept true to her word. She started looking for another job. She did not help her brother out as much as she did before. Once she got a job, she started to contribute to the bills for the first time. I felt much better in our relationship, knowing that she was now an almost equal partner. I decided to propose to Tina in September last year with the aim of tying the knot in June this year. She accepted my proposal and we posted about it on social media. However, when she was going to visit her brother that weekend, I noticed that she had removed her wedding ring. When I questioned her, she told me how her brother was very sensitive and that she would gently break the news of our engagement to him. I laughed and asked her, why was this even such a big deal? But she told me not to interfere, saying that he was her family and she knew how to handle him. This was true, so I let it go. I wanted to do something nice for me and Tina, so after checking my finances, I realized that I could easily buy a house for us. The house I currently lived in, I could give out for rent and earn some money on the side. I wanted to buy this house as a wedding gift for both of us and start afresh with Tina. I even talked with a realtor who could help us check out some beautiful properties. Tina was pleasantly surprised when I broke this news to her. She hugged me and told me how she could not wait to start the next chapter of life with me. Over the months, we have been searching for our perfect house. Tina had a lot of opinions about these houses and was not ready to lock down. However, in the end, we managed to find our dream home with a huge backyard, which is exactly what we wanted. It is also just 1.5 hours away from my office. And Tina mostly works from home, so we are good to go. Now, because I was buying this house for us, I was obviously keeping my name and Tina's name on the house deed. However, Tina had an issue with this. She demanded that since I already have one house under my name, I should keep her name and her brother's name for the second house. I was taken aback. I asked her if she was joking because why would I include her brother's name in our house deed? Tina told me that she had no assets to her name since she had no parents, and told me how insecure she felt that she was bringing in nothing to our marriage, so she wanted her name in the house deed. As for her brother, she told me how important he was to her, so she wanted me to include his name since he was also going to be family with me. I refused, and we had a huge fight. In the heat of the moment, I told her how weird it was for her to always bring up her brother, and that even though I had a sibling, her relationship with her brother seemed to be crossing boundaries. Hearing this, Tina burst into tears and walked away from me. Later that night, she again brought up how she expected me to add her name and her brother's name in our house deed, since it was the right thing to do, and how much it would mean to her if I included her family. She would keep pushing the issue, and I would just shut her down. The tension between us grew as the discussion circled back to this demand. It felt like a never-ending loop, with her expressing the importance of including her brother in our home ownership and me struggling to comprehend why this was even a consideration. I was caught in a whirlwind of confusion, frustration, and a growing sense of unease about the whole situation. Then last week I ran into Tina's best friend, Betty, at a coffee shop near my office. Turns out she had an interview with a company nearby. Now, I have met Betty several times, and Tina and she have been friends since college. Tina doesn't really have a lot of friends, so Betty and she were really close. Betty congratulated me on my upcoming wedding and teased me that I was now going to be a married man. I awkwardly smiled. She probed about our wedding plans, and I found myself struggling to answer truthfully. During this time, I had been thinking if I had even done the right thing to ask Tina to marry me, since we were having continuous fights about the house deed. I could not even talk about this with anyone, since I didn't want my sister or my parents to have a bad impression of Tina. Sensing my unease, Betty pressed for more information. Unable to contain myself, I decided to spill the beans about Tina's strange request regarding the house deed. I told her how Tina was demanding me to include her brother's name and refusing to back down. Betty's eyes widened with surprise, and she told me that this was really strange. I told her that this was exactly what I felt. For the first time, I felt validated that someone could see how weird my fiancé's request was, because it felt like I was going crazy. Betty then hesitatingly asked me if I knew the full story about Tina and her brother Kyle. I shook my head in confusion, and this is when Betty spilled the beans. Apparently, Tina's so-called brother is not actually her brother. You see, when Tina was growing up in different foster homes, she met Kyle, who was also an orphan. They quickly became very close and started introducing each other as brother and sister to other people. They had no family, so pretending to be each other's siblings gave them some sort of comfort and stability. However, when they grew up, they realized that other people found their relationship very odd. Kyle would always interfere in Tina's relationship, and her exes didn't like having him around. So this is why she started to tell people that Kyle and she were cousins, so people would think that they were actually related. This would mean that they would hang out and spend time with each other without their partners having an issue with it. Betty told me that Kyle's girlfriends would also have a problem with Tina, but when they would realize that she was a sister, they would not mind her much. As Betty shared these revelations, a mix of shock, confusion, and a hint of betrayal swept over me. The foundation of trust, which I believed my relationship was built on, began to crumble. Betty went on to tell me how she thought I already knew this since Tina was engaged to me, and she expected Tina to have come clean to me by now. I shook my head and told her that Tina never said any of this to me, and I had been living with the assumption that she was going to hang out with her brother every weekend. Betty nodded her head in understanding and told me that she had also found their relationship to be too close. But it was not her place to judge them, so she always kept her opinions to herself. Since this conversation with Betty, my head has been reeling. I'm trying to act normally as I can in front of Tina because I don't know how to bring this up. I am at a loss for words, and there is a lot to think about. I'm afraid to bring this up and find out how she has been lying to me our entire relationship. This might be the end of us because I don't know if I can ever trust her again. AITA for ending my relationship with my fiancé because she's been lying to me about her brother? Should I give her the benefit of the doubt for the sake of the years we have spent together? Please, Reddit, help me. Update 1. Thanks for all of the advice. I know how to proceed from here. I have always thought of ways to turn a negative situation into a positive situation, and most importantly, to not act or feed off of negative emotions. It was difficult to see how to do that for the past few days. For the majority of those who are telling me to end the relationship, I believe that it is the best course of action. Before that, I need to have an open discussion with Tina and hear her side of the story. Otherwise, it is going to bug me my entire life about why she lied to me. I've also reached out to my parents and told them everything. My parents have told me the same thing that everyone in the comments section has been saying. They don't want me to go through with my marriage, and they are glad that Tina and I are not bound to each other through property or finances, so it will be easy for me to break things off. I will update you once I confront her. Update 2. So I finally sat down to talk to Tina yesterday. Confronting Tina was both nerve-wracking and necessary. I needed answers. And I owed it to myself and our relationship to get to the bottom of things. I did not mince words and told her up front that I had met Betty and she had revealed everything about her and Kyle's relationship. Tina's eyes widened in shock as she asked, what exactly did I mean by that? I told her that I knew she and Kyle were not cousins, and he was not her brother. Tina looked taken aback, and her eyes darted nervously around the room. She stammered for a moment before attempting to explain. She admitted to the lie about Kyle being her brother, but justified it as a coping mechanism from their difficult past. She told me how growing up in foster care they had found solace in creating a bond that was more than just friendship. When they grew up, they realized that people would judge them, so to avoid judgment and interference from others, they decided to present themselves as cousins to avoid unnecessary complications in their relationships. Listening to her, I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I couldn't comprehend why Tina could not have just been honest with me. It wasn't about Kyle not being her biological brother, but about the years of deception and the strain it put on our relationship. I told her that we were about to get married and she had knowingly continued to lie about him being her brother. When I pressed her about the demand to include Kyle in the house deed, Tina's justification spiraled into an emotional plea. She claimed that he had been her constant support and anchor, and including him was a symbol of what families do for each other. I told her that I was going to marry her and start a family with her, but instead of considering me as her family, she wanted to include a guy she met in foster care and called him her brother. Tina started to cry and told me how their relationship was just purely platonic. This made me laugh, and I told her that the way Carl behaved around her was not platonic in any way. I questioned her if she had been sleeping behind my back with him all this time, but she vehemently refused. I grilled her and asked her if she and he had never done anything romantic. Breaking down, she finally admitted that he had been her first boyfriend and they were each other's first. She told me how it was for a very short while and they broke off immediately when they realized that they were not right for each other. She kept emphasizing how they just platonically loved each other now. However, my patience wore thin, and I could no longer accept these excuses. I expressed my disgust at the lies that she had been telling throughout our relationship. I told her that I could no longer be with her after knowing what I knew. This made her cry even more, and she started saying how this was why she had been hiding this secret for so long. She tried to guilt trip me by saying how I was also leaving her like her mother did years ago, and how she could not live without me. I told her I couldn't continue the relationship, that the foundation of trust had crumbled irreparably. At that moment, I no longer cared about her feelings and asked her to give me back my engagement ring. The ring once belonged to my grandma and was a family heirloom. I had given this to her with my mother's permission, thinking that she and I could start a family together. However, now that I was done with her, I didn't want her to take the ring with her. She begged me not to break off the engagement, but I stood my ground. Then Tina started to refuse to give me back the ring, telling me how I had given this to her, so now this belonged to her. I reminded her that what she had done to me amounted to catfishing, since she had depended on me financially throughout the relationship and then lied about her so-called brother. I told her she was not leaving my house until I had my ring back. Reluctantly, she removed the ring while crying and accused me of being heartless. I asked her to pack her bags and leave my house within the hour. Despite her pleas and promises to change, I stood firm in my decision. The person I thought I knew was a facade, and I did not want anything to do with her anymore. Desperate, Tina called Kyle to pick her up. However, when he learned that I had become aware of their relationship, he refused to get involved, perhaps knowing that if he showed up at my place, I would give him a serious ass-whooping. Tina had no choice but to call an Uber. As she left, she told me that she was sorry for everything and that she would wait for me. I ignored her and shut my door in her face. The aftermath has left me feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, heartbreak, but also a newfound clarity. It hurts me that my dream girl turned out to be such a fraud, and in my 30s I have to start dating all over again. However, I am glad that I found this out before we got married or bought a house. Otherwise, this would have been a much bigger shit show. Update 3. Thank you to everyone who's been sending me uplifting messages for the past month. To those who shared their own infidelity stories or offered advice, thank you. Your words have been instrumental for me in navigating this journey. I will be going for therapy, as many of you have advised. I understand that with time, this pain will subside, but it still hurts. Thankfully, my sister and my parents have been checking in on me regularly. I have blocked Tina from everywhere, and I have changed my door locks like some of you have advised. I've also installed cameras around my house just in case, though I doubt that Kyle or Tina will ever show up. This will be my final update for now, since I don't want to be reminded of her betrayal anymore. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.